So JoJo's Bizarre Adventure this week went on a very interesting path, and I have to say, not only was this incredibly creative, but it was also a little bit of a disturbing episode mixed into one, and I have to say, I don't understand how we can keep topping the stands in terms of thinking this has to be indestructible. But once again, after the last fight, I was like, man, this actually kind of feels like our pals are kind of up against the impossible, and they turn that impossible into a win, and then once again we get introduced to Babyface, who, holy hell, was a wild stand. You know, I never knew kids grew up so fast until I watched JoJo, because seeing this stand executed, you know, last week we got a little bit of a taste, you know, the blood was going to be some sort of a tracking device, but seeing how we have this guy who has this little laptop kind of device that he can put in the blood of whoever he's tracking, and then he finds an unfortunate soul to be the host for this stand demon spawn baby. And man, just that entire scene, as the questions were rolling out, I have to say, only in JoJo could they pull that off, I really think. It came across as both a disturbing but absolutely hilarious scene, and I don't know how they managed it, but they did. Just watching that scene play out, this woman's being like, who is this guy? Is this guy a cosplayer? Like, what's going on? I don't understand what's happening. I'm gonna call the cops. And just as you see the build up to basically the baby being born, I wasn't sure exactly the entire direction they were going to go. Like, were they actually gonna make her pregnant in the traditional sense? She's gonna have like the baby bump, and then just as they finish that off, and you just see that there's like this little baby at the back of her head, as we have this guy just feeding the baby information on how to kill. Like, I never knew a daycare program could be so violent and entertaining, but JoJo finds a way. I love the idea that you just see like these pictures, and he's like teaching you like, oh, this was a zebra, this is a giraffe, and this is how you kill them. Oh, and this is who you're gonna look for, these are skates, this is a baseball bat, and this is how you use it to kill them. Like, I just don't even know what to say to that. Like, only in JoJo can they force a woman to give birth to a stand and then train that stand within a matter of minutes to be a very talented killer. Only in JoJo, and because it's JoJo, they find a way to make the impossible into something that's actually really entertaining and actually pretty clever. The stand was pretty interesting, as the first half was pretty much just watching a man talk to his laptop as he trained this baby how to kill, as this woman just didn't know what was going on. But as you kind of see the stand start to be explored and how it can kill, it was pretty interesting how they directed that, as it's almost like this kind of cubism technique where the body slowly kind of falls apart into these cubes, and it was a really interesting technique, nothing that I can really compare to past JoJo episodes or parts, and I really like how the animators kind of directed that, because for me, having not read the manga, I was like, I don't exactly know what this stand is doing, but it looks absolutely incredible. And then as I'm watching this episode, I'm trying to piece together exactly what the stand's doing, so when the reveal comes from Giorno exactly what's happening and how it's actually kind of similar to his own stand, that was really interesting. The way they directed that visually, it was enough for me as an anime original to start piecing things together in my head while still not fully knowing the direction they wanted to go with this stand. So when the reveal comes, not only does the past visuals make a whole lot more sense, but it also is just cool to look at from a visual standpoint. You know, having Giorno, who is probably my favorite character still in this series, I love all these characters pretty close to equal, but I'd still probably put my money on Giorno as being my top pick. It was kind of interesting seeing how much he was struggling just right away, because Giorno in most of these casts should be considered pretty damn strong. And I like how you have just pieces being ripped apart from his throat, his eyes, his legs, and how you could overcome that. And I like the idea of almost gaining a power-up in a sense of kind of unlocking new ways to use your ability because you see a stand and it kind of gives you ideas how to incorporate that same design into your own. That's actually a really cool way to kind of grow your power for one of your main characters. Show an enemy stand who has a similar design stance and then just incorporate that into your own. This is why this manga author is kind of in a league of his own, because he actually comes up with these creative ways that doesn't feel like ass-pulls, but actually feels like really interesting development. And I love just how this episode looked. Like, there was a lot of close-up, exaggerated faces, the traditional, like, oh my god, this just looks colorful and beautiful, and at times pretty gory, like JoJo does in pretty much every episode, but I like just some of the perspective and just how they were directing certain shots, especially when Bruno and Triss were still in the turtle and Giorno was kind of looming over, kind of talking to them. There's interesting styles that they'll use to direct these scenes that only really JoJo can nail, because only in JoJo can you have two characters trapped inside a turtle while one of his friends is talking to him overhead. So I like how they'll play around with camera and perspective and just how they'll frame shots. It's very, very interesting, and I don't think there's been a single episode that has looked visually underwhelming or that any of the camera work has been underwhelming or lesser quality than pretty much any of the last. It feels like every single episode has been sticking to a standard, and at times even going above that standard, but at the very least, it's always looked damn impressive. And I think this episode, not just with the stand fight, but just some of the individual mundane shots of just characters sitting around talking, the way they were shifting around the camera, it actually added a lot and made the perspective and kind of warp and scale actually mean something past just, oh yeah, we know these characters are smaller than this other, but the way the camera was working, it actually gave you that sense of scale much better than a lot of anime, which would just stick into the turtle and then cut away, watch our character talk to the turtle overhead. Instead, we actually get to see both scales in one shot, which was really nice. The fight, though, was pretty interesting. I did like how they overcame it, and it almost feels like the fight is over with that whole piranha thing at the end, but maybe there'll be a couple extra minutes at the beginning of next week's episode, as it definitely seems like we are moving on to whatever next stand or fight is coming next based on the episode title. I could be mistaken, but I do like how they kind of handled that in one very satisfying episode, because it felt right. Like, you were seeing a character so beaten down, like you're thinking, like, is this the end for Giorno? Because you would think Giorno can't die, but it really did feel like no one can hear him, no one can see him. Babyface seems pretty much indestructible and he was going to get away, and I like the idea of overcoming the impossible by just taking the Stand's power and kind of incorporating into your own, detaching your hand, throwing it into his body, making it into a piranha, hell, even turning like pieces of his clothing back into his own body parts. Like, that is absolutely ridiculous, and only JoJo can do it. You could really say the motto for JoJo is only in JoJo, because it really does work wonders because of that. This episode was just, I don't even know how to just properly express how cool this episode was while being so ridiculous all at the same time. Every time we see a new character or a new enemy stand from this group who's trying to track down Bruno and the gang, they always find ways to take the most ridiculous ideas and not only turn it into something that's a very deadly stand, but also apply it to this weird personality attached to the stand user who seems to have a few too many screws loose in his head, but still comes across as a deadly tracker. I'm going to be interested to see where this antagonist's group is going to go, because I definitely feel like the more and more they defeat them, the more pissed off they're going to be, which is going to make them even more deadly than where they started off, which they started off already as a deadly assassin group, but as they're taking out more and more of their friends and allies, I assume that's going to bite them in the ass when essentially the big man in charge comes in and says, what the hell did you just do to all my allies and friends? As it definitely seems like this group, even though they are allies, they definitely do have a close bond from what we've seen so far, especially with the last double-length episode. So it'll be interesting to see just how much, like, the more and more they defeat them and the more that they see that their friends are being killed, what that's going to look like for the leadership of this group and how pissed off and deadly he will become. But I have to say, it was nice having a Giorno-focused fight again. As much as I love Bruno and the others, it was nice to see him do something pretty badass, because he started this anime off in a really badass fashion, stealing money from people, just kicking all the ass, but it was nice having him back into the swing of things, but also kind of gaining a sort of power up by using his ability in a new and creative way, because he saw how the enemy stand was functioning. Voice actors were killing it though. I have to say, I never thought I'd say this, but I really loved the voice acting for the enemy stand. It was a very, I would say, almost adorable and creepy voice wrapped up into one, which is what you would hope for a stand, especially one that basically impregnated a woman and then kind of supercharged grew up. Like, you would hope that it would kind of sound adorable, but also a little creepy all at the same time, which is what the voice actor did. But I think Giorno was kind of suffering as he was being broken apart. And I feel weird to say this, but I have to say it was pretty cool seeing our central cast being kind of ripped apart piece by piece. I feel bad for saying it because I love these guys, but it did look cool. No one can deny that. They just animated it pretty much flawlessly. Honestly, I don't think there's been a bad episode of this part. Really, this part is incredible. You can tell the director loves it. And once again, we had an amazing episode. It'll be interesting to see how next week starts off. If we are fully done with this fight, or are they going to do a bit more, maybe the other group's gonna look over and be like, oh shit, maybe we should have helped Giorno instead of just assuming that he was just waving for no reason. But let me know whatever you thought of this week's episode. Did you love it? Did you hate it? How was the adaptation? For manga readers or anime originals like myself, what did you think of the most ridiculous stand I think we've seen yet? Let me know. And be sure to like the video if you did enjoy, and also hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. But until next time, everyone, peace, take care, and have a good one.